Just Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, I'm Martin Ballard and welcome to episode 127 of this podcast series. This time we're going to take you behind the scenes again as we turn our attention onto lighting design.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, we met the radio and television presenter Richie Anderson, who made his panto debut in Leicester last Christmas. If you missed it or any of the other previous episodes, you can still listen to them, and there are many more to come from one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre. So make sure you subscribe where you normally get your podcasts from so that you don't miss out in the future. And don't forget, if you have any feedback or any questions about the podcast, about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general, send them in using the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk. So this time, I've been joined by the multi-skilled lighting designer, programmer and production electrician who's worked on countless pantomimes each and every year, as well as musical theatres, concerts, experiences, events and all sorts of other things across the UK and around the world. Matt Ladkin, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks Martin. How are you?
Good, thank you. We were talking about the fact that it's probably 3 years since we last spoke to you on this podcast series. So what's been happening since then? Tell us about some of the things you've been doing.
So since then, it's been a real mix for me. I've been trying to diversify and also just have a bit more fun in the work that I do. So I've been doing some musical theatre out in Brazil, some, large-scale corporate events, big parties, and then theatre in the UK, and of course, I think probably 7 or 8 pantos since we last spoke.
Wow. And we talked before about your sort of background, and we often talk about training and, what courses are available and so on, but your sort of development was, I guess, what you might call an old-fashioned apprenticeship. You don't learn any better than doing the job, do you?
No, absolutely. There are fantastic courses out there. There are obviously a lot of drama schools that offer design courses, and certainly did when I was, 17, 18. But I kind of made the decision that education wasn't for me and I'd rather just go out into the world. So I spent a couple of years at my local rep theatre. Unfortunately, there are less and less of those in existence these days. But I kind of learnt my skills there. We produced sort of 12, 15 shows a year, plus had visiting companies coming in with shows, one-nighters tours and that kind of thing. So it really gave me a really good grounding in all aspects of theatre, but I specialised from kind of an early age in lighting. And then, kind of ran with that and went freelance after that.
So you really started, this is the Mercury in Colchester, isn't it? You really started as early as 16 years of age.
Yeah, again, things have changed. You now can't really work in tech theatre until you're 18, certainly in a professional capacity anyway. But yeah, I started as a casual whilst I was still doing my A-levels there, sort of doing the get-ins, get-outs, and then was offered a full-time role, which I spent about a year there, which was, it was a great time to be at the Mercury. They had a company at the time, so there was a troupe of actors that were full-time employed. We were producing a lot of, original works plus Shakespeare, musicals, panto. So yeah, it was a really vibrant, and it still is a really vibrant regional venue in the UK with a fantastic programme.
And of course, it's one of the many theatres that you return to on a regular basis and still work at today as a designer.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I wasn't there last year. That was scheduling and new artistic directors. But yeah, I went back and I've lit 3 shows there in sort of the last 3 years, which has been great, 2 pantos and then a play as well, which has been lovely, to be able to go back to where I started and design again. It's fabulous.
So would you recommend for anybody who's interested in the technical side of theatre, getting a broad background of everything? Because even if you do specialise, as you have now done in terms of lighting design and programming and so on, you still have to have an understanding of everything else, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I would say try and, to anybody, to any young person, try and get as much experience as you can in every discipline. I also, as a kid, I acted as well, and so know that side of it as well. And I just think having a grounding overall enables you to be a better designer anyway, but it also just gives you more opportunities. It's a really tough industry, I'm not going to lie, and the more skills you have, the more work you can get and the more money you can earn.
Versatility is really useful these days, isn't it?
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the sort of tools that you have at your disposal then.
In this day, you have even more than certainly when I was starting out in the industry. Your main tools are kind of split into two categories. You've got your control equipment, so that's what you use to actually create what the lights do. You tell very specialised computer software what the lights do, when they're going to do it, how long it's going to take, what colour they are, and things like that. And then you have the lights themselves. More and more so these days we're using moving lights and automated lighting, and they're really complex lights that can do multiple things. Back in, even 20 years ago, most lights had you put a coloured gel in front of them, so like a transparent piece of plastic, that changed their colour. You could put in a metal template gobo to create a pattern on the stage, and then you can control the intensity. Now we've got moving lights that you can decide remotely where they're going to be positioned. You can change their size, change their shape, change their colour, and everything remotely, which obviously gives you much more flexibility to be able to create really dynamic shows very easily in a way, but obviously everything is more complicated because there's lots of moving parts inside everything.
As a designer, it's not just about the lights themselves and how they're programmed. It's about where you position them. It's
Absolutely.
about, obviously you can create different effects by lighting from above or below or from the side. There are all sorts of things you can do, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. Design has kind of changed. In the old days, because one light could do one very specific job, you had to think a lot earlier in the process about what every single light was going to do. Now it's more, for me certainly, creating systems of lights. So having strong backlight coming from the centre, from the sides, side light, and just creating those positions. And then because the lights can do so much more, the actual creative process then shifts much later when you're actually in the venue or when you're using previs to actually create the looks, because you've got a toolkit that allows you to do everything really.
As you said, traditionally you would have had floodlights, spotlights, using gels and gobos, and they would have been focused manually. They would have been up on a grid, so you had to literally get up on a cherry picker or ladder to actually focus them because they didn't come down very easily. Now, of course, that's so much easier. Not only do you have movers that can change colour and so on, but now in some theatres at least you have movable grids as well, so they can actually move up and down in the show and sometimes sideways.
Oh, absolutely. Automation again has come on leaps and bounds in the last 10 years. And yeah, it's not uncommon, certainly in like the West End and the larger touring shows, where your side light, as an example, which is the light that sits really close down, very low down, and crosses across the stage to light people, that will track up and down throughout the show so that you can get bits of set on, and so that you can actually move the positions of it to create different looks. So yeah, we now kind of have moving lights, which is wonderful.
So how do you visualise the design before you actually get into a theatre? Is that all done on a computer?
Pretty much. I work in a software program called Vectorworks, and that's a 3D computer-aided design software. And I can visualise in more or less the real world where every bit of set's going to be, where every single light's going to be. I can look at what shots and what that light will actually be able to see around bits of set. I basically start with the venue itself and build that in 3D, then add in all of the set elements that we're going to get, and then decide where my lighting positions are going to be, place lights in those positions, check that I can get all of the angles and things that I think I want to do with them, and then that then allows me to generate all of the paperwork for the show, ready for the team to actually physically install it.
And when that actually materialises finally in the theatre itself, is it always pretty much as you'd envisaged it, or does it have to be adapted?
With the use of 3D software, it's becoming a lot easier. Obviously, back when I started, lighting plans and a lot of the scenic design and all of the elements were drawn on paper. So you're looking in a 2D world and you can't really visualise where everything's going to be. Now with these advances in technology and being able to use 3D software and modelling, it means that everything is a lot more accurate. So as an example, last year I was doing Sleeping Beauty in Swindon. We had these gorgeous curved portals, which obviously means that to be able to get lights to be able to see through them, you have to put them at different heights so that they can see past the curve of the actual piece of scenery. And because I modelled all of that in 3D, we were probably within 50 millimetres of reality.
And the one thing that I think we may have mentioned before is that there's been a real crossover in recent years of ideas from other sort of genres. For instance, from music, rock concerts and so on. Some of the stuff that was developed for those have actually crossed over into theatre, and maybe vice versa, which is great because you work in all those areas.
Oh, 100%. Technology, because of the fact that there are more people doing it and there's more technology available, it's become a lot cheaper. And that means that whereas before, a large stadium rock show may have 300-400 moving lights on it, there are now some West End shows that also have that quantity of lights, because everything has come down in a price point and everything is a lot more readily available. There's not really now one toolkit for one genre and one toolkit for another. Everything, as you rightly say, has kind of merged together and has become one sort of larger industry.
Yeah, one of the recent things that's been a development, which I think began in theme parks and certainly in events, is projection mapping. Is that something you think we might see a lot more of in theatre in the future?
It's certainly being used. Stranger Things, Hunger Games are using that technology now, and it is certainly coming into theatre a lot more. At the moment, it's very expensive, as is anything with video content. It will certainly come in. I think it's going to be a few years before we start to see the large-scale use of it in theatre, just because creating content is so incredibly expensive.
Yeah, and maybe rather like the LED screens that Imagine have been pioneering in Panto, lighting design has to adapt as well because of the sort of issues that might cause, and maybe the same with projection mapping.
Oh, 100%. LED is a lot easier in most ways to work with because of the fact that it's actually physically a source of light that is then projected through, or that you can then see. It means that you have to change your style of lighting, because what you're then trying to do is you're trying to pull physical objects away from a 2D surface and actually give depth to the real stage so that it matches up to the video content. With projection mapping, because of the fact that it's a source of light that is being thrown onto an object, it creates a lot of issues with shadow, and if you're throwing light onto it, it will then bleed through into the content and you then can't see the projection mapping. So yes, it becomes a very technical way of having to design.
So all of these new innovations are fabulous, but they can be more challenging in some ways, and I guess that's the way progress is, isn't it? You have to adapt and evolve along with it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look back to kind of the work that I was doing 25 years ago, and everything was so much simpler. It's not unusual now for, like large scale shows certainly, to have a 4-5 week technical process just to get them to a point where they can start going into dress runs and previews, because everything is so incredibly complex in the industry now, and it is getting much more difficult to actually put on a show because the expectations of audiences are so much higher as well.
I hear an awful lot about show stops, and some people say there are more show stops these days than ever before for that very reason, because there's so much more things to go wrong.
People that come to the theatre with me often say that I'm the curse, as I don't think I've been to a West End show in probably the last 6 or 7 years where a show stop hasn't occurred when I've been watching it. But yeah, with all of this technology and with all of these, large pieces of scenery that are moving, LED walls that are moving, lights that are moving, there is a safety factor involved in those as well. And what you can't do is you can't just carry on if you've got a problem, because it's the safety of the cast and also the safety of the audience that are the most important part of any production, is keeping everybody safe. And so absolutely, the more bits you put into it, the more likely something is to go wrong and the more likely you're going to have to stop.
With that in mind, whatever industry people work in, whatever career they have, we often hear about computer crashes. I wonder whether that's an issue in lighting and lighting design as well, because do you have a backup in a theatre if the computer crashes and you literally can't do anything with any of the lights? Is there a backup for that?
Yeah, so most of the systems that I use certainly will come with redundancy. So we would have two physical lighting consoles that are connected together, talking to each other via networking, so that if one does crash, another one automatically takes over. Automation systems have redundancy with certainly their computer aspects of it. Same as sound systems to a certain extent, although because of how sound works and how it's actually processed, the live elements, like if the sound desk itself went down, that would be a show stop, because they don't typically have a backup anywhere on that part of the sound system, but certainly things like the playback racks and tracks and things like that will always have a backup.
Okay, so how differently do you approach a pantomime, as an example, in comparison to an event or a concert? Is the process the same?
The process is similar, certainly with the Imagine pantomimes, because of the fact that we're working with stock sets that are coming in. There is less of a design consultation where you have in a typical show with a scenic designer, a costume designer and people like that, because that is already being brought into the show as a complete package. But the actual process of lighting design is the same if I'm lighting a fashion show or, lighting a pantomime. It's all about placing the lights in the right places, deciding what lights I want, going out to a lighting hire vendor, getting prices back, making sure that we're in budget, and then pushing that design through in exactly the same way as any of the other shows that I do.
In some ways, the involvement of an audience is slightly different, though, isn't it? If you're in a theatre show or a pantomime, you're looking at something from a distance. If you're going to an event like Paddington, the one that you worked on, for instance, or a fashion show, it's a bit more immersive, isn't it? Because the lighting and so on is around you as part of the audience, as well as those people that you're looking at.
That is true. So in terms of actual physical design, yes, they are different. I would say, though, that with the pantomimes that I do, certainly, I will always try and include the auditorium in that, because everybody is used, as you say, to going to live experiences, immersive shows, and also just even in your TV at home now. A lot of TVs are now coming with all of these backlights and immersive sound and things like that. People are used to being much more involved in the experience itself, and I don't think that pantomime certainly is any different from that. And as an audience member, you should feel connected and you should feel involved in that.
So in many ways, you're juggling maybe a number of shows, events and so on at the same time, aren't you? But in terms of panto, when would you have your first sort of production meeting to get together with the other creatives and think about your design?
Typically, a year for me would be debriefing last year's shows. I'm going up on Monday to Imagine to debrief. And so we do a debrief sort of the end of January, start of February. I then get contracted probably end of March, start of April with which venues and which titles I'm doing. And then usually we would start discussions probably late April, start of May, in terms of initial designs and starting to get costings ready, so that we are sort of by the end of August fully locked in what we're doing.
And then, of course, you have a limited amount of time in the venue itself before tech rehearsals kick off and before you know it, the show's open. Is that, a shorter period of time in the venue for you compared to a musical theatre show, for instance?
Oh, absolutely. In commercial pantomime, we typically have either 5 or 6 days from arriving at the venue where there is nothing in there, it's a completely empty venue, to having our first public performance. So it's usually a 2-day process to get the set installed, get the lights installed, get everything focused and ready for tech. We'd then usually take the show in probably 5 sessions, have a couple of dress runs, because obviously we have junior ensemble. It means that we have to both tech the show and dress the show twice or 3 times in some cases, depending on the number of teams you've got, and then we open. Musical theatre, Paddington, the experience, I think we were on site for 9 or 10 weeks in total.
Wow.
Most musicals, I probably get 4 or 5 weeks of tech, dress and previews before a show is locked. And as I say, we get 6 days with Panto. So it's a very condensed period.
And obviously it's good once you've worked in a venue because you have experience, because every venue is different. And as an example, I know you've worked at the Belgrade in Coventry, for instance, which is a traditional theatre with everything that entails. But you've also worked at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester, which is a concert hall where there is no lighting grid, there is no proscenium arch, everything has to be brought in advance. So every venue is different.
No two venues are the same. My golden rule is that I try and do 3 years in a venue, because I think on the first year you're finding out what that venue can actually do, what front of house lighting positions they have, how it sits in the venue, how the show sits. The second year you make improvements, and hopefully the third year it is the best work that you can do. And at that point, for me personally, I then want to move on to a new challenge, basically.
How many was it last Christmas for you?
Last Christmas was actually quiet. I only did 2 last year, which is quite nice for me.
And did you get a chance to go and see them both, or did you just leave after dress rehearsals?
No, so I will always stay for the first show, mostly so that I can just make sure that in front of a full audience, the show sits and it runs well, and it enables obviously the creative team to then have discussions about any changes that we do. But I don't go back after they've opened, if I'm brutally honest.
Everybody talks about Panto not being complete without an audience, and that's absolutely right, isn't it? So you want to see the full experience. How often do you have to tweak after that, though, because something doesn't quite sit right?
Hopefully, in an ideal world, you don't. There are probably 2 or 3 minor tweaks that you have to make. Some shows will have to have cuts and things made to them just because of running times. And again, until you get that audience in, you can't judge how long somebody is going to clap, how long somebody is going to laugh, and all of their reactions, which actually can potentially add, 15 or 20 minutes onto a show, depending on how rowdy an audience are.
Now, all the way through, I've been talking about you as a lighting designer and a lighting programmer. For those who have no idea, because they have no experience in theatre, and some who work in theatre and still don't know, what's the difference?
As a designer, my responsibility is to create the visual look of the show from lights. I work alongside set designers, costume designers, the director, choreographer, and all of the stage management team to have an overall vision of what everything's going to be. From a pre-production perspective, that means that I create all the lighting plans, I decide where the lights are going to go, what they're going to do, and then when we actually get into the venue, what each lighting cue or look is going to be, what colour it is, how bright it is, and things like that. As a programmer, you work alongside the lighting designer and you translate their ideas into physical typing, into as I say, a very specialised computer program with its own custom lighting desk, which for all intents and purposes is a large keyboard but with specialised buttons that do very special things. And you then, as a programmer, take what the designer wants, you create that as looks, and you then build the cue list of the show and you build the physical looks of the lights.
So for obvious reasons, I guess it's a lot easier if you program your own designs.
Depends on the show. Certainly for Pantos, I will. So for Imagine, I program myself because of the amount of time that we have. Trying to actually talk to somebody and have that link takes obviously longer than my brain just going, this is what I want it to look like, and I type away and I get it done. Certainly in a lot of the other projects that I have, I will always try and have at least 2 people on the lighting team. Sometimes I'll also have an associate, or I will be an associate for a designer. And by having that larger team, it means that you can actually deflect from situations. So as an example, as a designer, I can leave my programmer to do something and go and distract a director and a choreographer because I know that we're up against it and that something isn't right. But rather than me as a programmer and designer, I would have to be sitting there typing away and everybody's waiting for me. I can go and distract people and kind of play the politics game whilst somebody else is doing that. So it's very beneficial to have a multi-person team, but there are some times that just time doesn't allow for that.
The other person we should mention is the operator, because somebody has to operate your programming. Once you've left the venue, somebody will be there for the run. How much experience do you need to be able to do that job?
You need to have a basic experience of being able to use the lighting desk itself, because there are times that things will go wrong. As I say, these lights have many moving parts in them. Sometimes they need to be switched off, turned back on, reset. And you also need to have a good eye and knowledge of what is actually happening and what it should look like. In terms of the actual physical operation of it, I'll be completely honest. You press one button when somebody else tells you to press it, and that is pretty much all you're doing. But it's the ability to react to situations that's the really important part, because if something does go wrong, you ideally don't want to have a show stop, and you certainly don't want to have a show cancellation. So it's your ability to be able to fault find and to understand how the system works as a whole that's the really important part. The physical actual operation is the very easy part.
So we've talked about the sort of development of lighting through from the floods and spots and gobos and gels to movers and LEDs and even projection mapping and LED screens and so on. But what's next, do you think? What does the future hold maybe for the next 10 years? We're going to see some more innovation?
As an industry, we're constantly evolving and innovating. Everything seems to just be getting brighter. And I think that's because with every new technology, so obviously LED technology came in probably 10, 12 years ago in its very basic form. And over the last 10 or 12 years, everything has got more efficient, everything has got brighter. And we're now kind of getting to the crux of what LED technology can be. They're developing new things with laser sources all of the time. A new product actually was released 2 days ago, which is a new laser light emitting device. It's not a laser, it's using laser and phosphor to basically reduce power and create very high output things.
Wow.
Not much has actually changed when you look at what a light did 20 years ago to what a light does now. Things have just become more reliable. Things have got smaller, things have got lighter, and things now are weather resistant. So most lights that I use, certainly even in indoor environments, could be used outdoors all the time, and that's something that we didn't see. So I think there's going to be a movement towards that. But in terms of actually new lights, there will always be, new toys and new things to play with and new concepts. But I think there won't be any new major developments in how we produce light, certainly in sort of the next 10 years.
And what about the next year for you then? Because we've talked about Panto plans really from March onwards and maybe having designs already started by the summer. But what else are you working on this year?
So I've got a real mix of stuff. There's a couple of immersive shows that are potentially coming into Europe that I'm involved in. I've got a big dance show down at the O2 in March, a couple of musicals that are already in the pipeline, and then really anything else that comes along. I'm really fortunate that this year I've been able to kind of take a small step back and not be as worried about getting in lots of work, certainly for the start of the year, and I'm quite enjoying having some time off, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I guess one of the joys for you is the variety of stuff that you do. You've not been forced into specialising into one particular genre, which is great because it keeps it fresh, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I shouldn't say this. I get bored very easily. And so having that variety of work is really great for me. And also having different size and scales of shows, having a musical in a 3,000 capacity arena in Brazil 2 years ago was incredible. But so was doing a little studio show for 80 people in the middle of last year. I love being able to have that variety and that diversity because it just keeps everything fresh and keeps me on my toes all the time.
I can't believe how tough it must have been to go all the way to Brazil.
It was absolutely horrific to spend a month there at one of the largest music festivals in the world. Yeah, it was a real struggle.
Well, listen, congratulations on another fabulous Panto season and all the other work that you've been doing. And it's been great catching up with you again. Matt, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me, Martin.
And that's it for another episode, I'm afraid. Don't forget to send any comments or questions via the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk. Make sure you subscribe through your favourite podcast app and join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 128, when I'll be joined by the stage and television actor and Crew Lyceum favourite panto comic, Steve Johnston.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.